Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today at the AMEBC Virtual Roundup 2021. We're here to present Minaurum Gold's flagship asset, our Alamos Silver Project located in southern Sonora State, Mexico. We'll be exhibiting our latest results from our Phase 2 drill program down there. My name is Sunny Penu. I handle the investor relations and corporate development. And alongside with me, I'm very happy to have Steve Maynard, our VP of Exploration, who oversees our project portfolio and is also down there on a day-to-day basis at our Alamos project. And we've had a lot of success, so a lot of attribution down to the technical team there with identifying these several brand new high-grade silver veins. So we're really excited to present the project for everybody here. So Steve, thanks a lot for joining me.
It's good to be here, Sonny. Nice to see you again.
Yes, absolutely. So I guess to start off, I mean, this is kind of a nice way to kind of talk about the project, this picture here. You know, since the day that we started on the project for the last few years, you know, we've learned not only a lot about the geology side of things, but just the history. It seems like every day that goes by, we learn something new. And one of the first things that we learned down at the project was this particular feature called the Serra-Cacharamba, which when we discussed, you told me that it was observed by a gentleman by the name of Alexander von Humboldt back in 1808 when he was down there. And he described this area as being laying on a bed of silver. I didn't quite understand what you meant by that, but when he described it, in his words, he said that he saw a train of 1,000 mules of ingots and ingots of silver being hauled back to Mexico City. So with that in mind, it obviously makes exploration more exciting. So, but we've learned so much more. So it's good to see that relationship between history and our current modern exploration program. So, yeah, I mean, anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, no, it's kind of fun to think that we're in the footsteps of the old Prussian geographer and who saw so much back then around that time, about 120, rather 220 years
200
ago.
years, yeah, 200 years ago.
And it's interesting to think that he actually walked some of these hills as well.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's going to be an exciting presentation, but you know, before we get into the details, we are going to be making forward-looking statements. So please keep in mind to do your own due diligence on the company before you make any investment decision. All the information is available on our website, as well as you can visit cdar.com for anything further. But before I pass it off to Steve, I mean, I want to talk about Minaurum briefly and background of the company. You know, apart from our flagship Alamos Silver Project, where we've had a lot of success, we've had success on our remainder portfolio as well. You know, we characterize ourselves as a diversified precious metals exploration company with a focus in Mexico. And, you know, what we look for are district scale potential exploration projects that have received little to no modern exploration and you know, and preferably in brand new jurisdictions. So far, you know, in addition to Alamos, we've had a couple of other early stage discoveries. We have our Adelita copper gold skarn porphyry project, which has received some pretty interesting results there. That was one of our initial projects that we drilled. One of the intercepts intersected 100 meters of 1% copper that was down dip on the skarn, as well as our Arena project down in the state of Oaxaca, where we drilled one of the first projects we drilled there as well. That one of the intersections was 30 meters of a couple of grams per ton gold. A couple other projects of note I would mention is Aurifero. We just acquired that recently. We'll be doing some work sometime in the near future there. We have a very large land holding in the state of Guerrero in the Guerrero Gold Belt. We have a couple of projects there. There's a 80-kilometer trend of 30 million ounces of gold that's being discovered there. We are one of the largest landholders there. A couple of early stage projects there. And additionally, we have a Santa Marta VMS copper project that we're looking to do some work this year as well. And our most recently acquired project, the Teviche project, which is a silver project, we recently optioned that to Fortuna Silver. You can find all the project information on our website, but the key focus for this presentation is our Alamos Silver Project. We're also listed on the TMX under MGG and under the OTCQX under MMRGF. And just a couple points on the technical team, as you folks already met Steve Maynard. He's had a significant experience down in Mexico there. He was part of the team that discovered the Cerro San Pedro gold deposit in Mexico. Two of our principal founders that co-founded Minaurum include Dr. Peter McGaw and David McKinley-Jones. Peter McGaw, as many of you who probably know or don't know, he is the co-founder of MAG Silver. He discovered in excess of 200 million ounces down there at their Cinco de Mayo Juanicipio deposit. And alongside with David McKinley-Jones, whose geological model in the Guerrero Gold Belt has been responsible for a number of the discoveries there. He was the original discoverer of the Los Filos deposit back when he was with Teck Mexico, and was one of the early team members of Torex Gold in the early days. But everybody else here, you can look at your own leisure at our website. But what we've really been trying to do is build a very strong core technical team with a lot of knowledge and experience down in Mexico, so we know what we're looking for. I guess another bonus is Steve, Dave, and Peter all know each other and they get along great. So that makes things easier sometimes. So Steve, I'll pass it on to you.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. So Steve,
we have excellent infrastructure and logistics. Specifically, first of all, we have a 37,000 hectare land position on the Alamos project. That is more than adequate for the project. There is very good access, paved and gravel roads. There's a paved road that crosses the northern margin of the project area, and there's gravel roads that give access to most of the rest of the project. We have long-term community agreements in place with 2 ejidos and 1 community. We enjoy excellent relationship with the communities. We've given them a certain amount of employment, and we've also helped them out in certain ways that I'll talk about here in a second. The community relations and permitting and drilling are all handled by the same group that handles those issues for Silvercrest at Las Chispas. They have a lot of experience at this, and they're tied in very well with the local community. So we've had no problems with that in that respect. We border the Piedras Verdes mine land package on our north side. Piedras Verdes is a 50,000 ton per day open pit copper mine, it's a porphyry copper deposit owned by Cobre del Mayo. They're the largest employers in the municipality of Alamos, and we enjoy good relations with them as well. In terms of population, we're about the municipality of Alamos, which is like a county. Its county seat is the city of Alamos, which has about 25,000 people. Navajoa City is about 30 to 40 minutes away, and it has about 100,000 population. And then Ciudad Obregón is a larger city, about an hour to the north, but its airport is only about 45 minutes away, and you can take direct flights from Ciudad Obregón to Tijuana or Mexico City. So we have very good access that way. The city of Hermosillo, the capital of the state of Sonora, is about 4 hours to the north, and you can get to the project area actually in an 8-hour drive from Tucson. It's pretty accessible. So let's move to the next slide here. Yeah, COVID-19. Of course, this is something that's been on our minds to great extent over the last year, and unfortunately, I expect this will continue some. Mm-hmm. I suspect most of the coming year. On our project, we run the project out of a remote camp in the southwestern part of the project area. It has 1 road access to it. No one can go in, no worker goes into the camp without a negative PCR test within 24 to 48 hours of entry into the camp. I can report that we had no infections in 2020 and no lost time accidents. So we're very pleased with that. There's a cost with this, of course. But I feel that the money was well spent. We were able to get 14,000 meters of drilling done from July till December with a good safety record, and we have maintained the goodwill of the community and helped to maintain the health standards there. We have helped out earlier in the pandemic. We helped out the community with deliveries of groceries for community members and certain other individuals or families that were identified as being in need.
And basic hygiene supplies.
Basic hygiene supplies as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very much in our interest to keep people healthy around us, even if they're not direct employees. Yeah. We continue to monitor the situation at our other projects. We touched on the historical nature of the district in von Humboldt's visit in around 1800, 1805 or so. But the history, the more detailed part of the history, and probably the more important part of it, is the fact that since its discovery in about 1680 or 1682, the district has produced an estimated 200 million ounces of silver from three principal producers, those being the Quintero mine, which produced something like 100 million ounces of silver, Promontorio, around 70 million ounces, and Minas Nuevas, which produced about 30 million ounces more recently, and that's why it's called Minas Nuevas, new mines. Production stopped on all of these deposits because for the immediate reason of drastic drops in the price of silver in the 1890s and again in the 1900s. And then right after that, it started the Mexican Revolution, which made work impossible. The Minas Nuevas mine was sacked during the revolution, as was the town of Alamos. Although there was a little bit of production at Minas Nuevas after the revolution for about a year in the early 1920s, and then there's been some artisanal mining production sporadically during the 20th century. But basically, for all intents and purposes, serious mining on the project stopped prior to the Mexican Revolution. There were, in fact, two exploration programs, one during the 1950s and 1960s that involved underground drilling at the Promontorio mine, as well as some rehabilitation of some of the workings at La Quintera. And there was reworking of the dumps and tails at those deposits during that time. But there's been no significant exploration really ever since until Minaurum came on the scene. Okay, next slide. Okay, the phase 1 drill program. We started this in August of 2017 and finished it in just about a year ago in January of 2020. And we drilled 40 holes, about 18,000 meters of core. The purpose of the first one drilling, and this is an important point to remember here, the purpose of phase 1 drilling was not to develop resources, but was to follow up on our geological mapping program and test each one of the 26 or so vein zones that we discovered on the project, most of which are far afield from the original historical producers. We didn't want to get pulled in too close on the historical producers for two reasons. One is that they're already mined out, at least significantly. Right. And secondly, you could maybe have some nice results in the margins of these mines and then lose focus and just start concentrating on that. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to see what the potential of the district was as a whole.
Yeah, the district scalability, to see how
district
far
scalability.
We, you know,
yeah, right. Well put. So we drilled 19 vein zones, and 14 of them returned high grades. So that's something to build on, and that's what we did in 2020 with the phase 2 program. So what was the model that we were using here? We've spoken about, many of the viewers here are going to, they'll have heard of the piano key model, which we've been promoting or talking about for the last couple of years at PDAC and Roundup and news releases.
Mm-hmm.
But in this piano key model, we talk about a system of horsts and grabens, or you can think of them as raised and depressed keys on a piano keyboard.
Right.
The idea here is that you have an epithermal precious metal system as one of the most important models for that or explanations is the Buchanan model from his 1981 paper. We believe the upraised keys or blocks or horsts, you would have erosion to a lower structural level with respect to this geological model. And the depressed keys would not be eroded to that same depth. So the idea was, has been, and is to drill across these depressed blocks and see if we can't find the upper levels of these epithermal veins. Whereas the veins that are exposed at the surface presently represent upthrown blocks that have had a deeper level of erosion. Okay, what have we found? What we have found is that the main vein zones are actually on the margins of these blocks, of these horsts and grabens. We do, and we have seen blind veins in downthrown blocks as well. But the most important ones, at least so far, appear to be or lie on these block margins. So the model is very useful to understand this. We are always in the process of revising it, and I think we can expect to see a significantly revised model this year. Okay. So the discovery hole at Europa-Guadalupe, and where we're going here is that I want to just refresh everybody's memory about what that hole was about. We drilled from the middle of one of these downthrown blocks. We drilled to the west a 550-meter hole, something from a 560-meter hole across a downthrown block. And in doing so, the original target of that hole, this is hole 7, drilled in December of 2017. Hole 7, the initial target was the Nueva Europa vein zone. And then we decided to keep it going, and we intersected the Europa vein zone about 350 meters down dip from the surface expression of the Europa-Guadalupe zone. We drilled an interval of 8.25 meters of 1.76 kilos of silver per ton. And it has significant base metals as well, copper, lead, and zinc. So we've showed that the vein zone is significant. It has some very nice numbers, and it's about where we predicted it from surface expressions. And we also hit an interesting zone in the Nueva Europa zone that was an interval of 1.2 meters of a little more than 500 grams of silver. Note also, and if you can follow my cursor here, that we hit these vein zones in the hanging wall of the main intercept in hole 7. That's evidence of these blind veins. We don't understand their relationship exactly with the main zone, but there they are. They're significantly higher in the hole. And any one of these things could grow into a significant intersection.
Steve, I was going to ask, you talk about these blind veins. How often do you see these blind veins from the holes that we've drilled? I mean, do you see that consistently over all the vein systems that we drilled, or does it kind of vary?
We frequently see them. Getting them to hang together into a consistent vein that you can predict its location and drill it and find it. Right. Yeah. We have not demonstrated that yet.
Okay.
I'm speaking now of these smaller blind veins.
Correct. Yeah. Okay, I understand.
Okay. I should also point out that on the right side of the schematic cross section, semi-schematic cross section here, is hole 8. Hole 8, we hit 9.6 meters vein in the Travessia zone that its average grade was 88 grams. This is, but 9.6 meters is relatively, that's a nice fat section. So that is something we're pursuing as well in the 2020 drill program, is following up on that. See what might happen.
Phase 2. Okay.
Okay. So we're going to talk some more then about the Europa-Guadalupe zone. We'll look at some of the drilling that we did in 2020 on that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Remember, we were talking about phase 1 and phase 2 drilling. In the upshot of the phase 1 drilling and the geological mapping that went with it was the prioritizing our drill targets. But let me just point out that at the time we started in August 2016, if you look on the left side of the slide here, you'll see these were the veins, the vein zones that we knew about when we started 4.5 years ago, in August of 16. We knew about Minas Nuevas, we knew about La Quintera, we knew about Promontorio. I had heard mention of these other vein zones, but had not seen them, didn't know anything about them. All right, after 3 years of geological mapping and 18,000 meters of drilling, we had come up with 26 vein zones with a cumulative strike length of 34 kilometers. You look at the map here on the right, and you can see that we have in red what we've got are the past producing deposits. In blue, then are the drill tested vein zones, and then we have some other ones here that are in green that we've not drilled tested, and those are lower priority. But let me just then. We'll talk about now the prioritization and how we came up with that.
Yeah, so you and the technical team grouped it into 3 tiers.
That's right.
For exploration.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And one of the criteria, of course, was the phase 1 drill results. Now, I'm not going to go through and read all of these.
Yeah,
other than to point out the Europa-Guadalupe, we had, as I mentioned before, we had 8.25 meters of 1.7 kilos. Promontorio had a couple of nice holes there, holes 4 and 5, and hole 25. Nueva Europa had, we had a meter or so of 0.5 kilo. So we had all these interesting results from these various targets.
And I think one thing to make clear, Steve, is in the phase 1, I mean, these holes were long holes. They were intercepting vein systems beside to the east, to the west. So a lot of these grades are
and Sonny, that's a very good point.
And some of these grades are like pinches and swells into that vein. Phase 2 is completely different, but I just want to make that point there.
Right. Well, that's right. The majority of these holes were long, shallow angle holes. When I say shallow angle, I'm talking about as low as 35 degrees from horizontal.
Yeah.
Maybe as steep as 50. We rarely drilled steeper than that in the first phase. The purpose of these holes was to cut across these major structures to see what we could find in them. And we were not afraid to drill fairly long. We had one hole 10 was drilled at a minus 40 degree angle at the collar, I think it was 40, it might have been 45. And it drilled more than 800 meters that way with a man-portable rig. So it was also
exactly
skill of the drillers that they were able to do this without losing any equipment.
Exactly. And these holes do take time to make sure that there's no lost holes.
Yeah.
And especially with man-portable rigs, easy to demob and mob. I mean, that's the preferred way, especially with the environmental approach as well.
Yeah, that's right. We don't want to make a mess where that's not necessary, and we have faith in the drillers that they can do these long holes where we need to go.
Right.
And it's worked out very well.
Right.
In that respect. So let's go on to the next slide here. Phase 2 drill program. So the goal here was to step out at 50 to 100 meter intervals, along strike and up and down dip from the best phase 1 intersections.
Yeah, and to quote unquote to kind of quantify what we found in phase 1.
Yeah, that's right. We want to start to be able to quantify this.
Right.
So how did we decide what to drill in phase 2? Well, we came up with a ranking system. or three-tiered ranking system. Of the 26 or so vein zones that we had, Peter McGaw and David Jones and I sat around a table, and we gave thumbs up and thumbs down on each one of these vein zones based on the host rock characteristics, past production, the drilling results, and other available geochemistry, as well as structural geological considerations. If we had 3 thumbs up, that was put into the first tier, 3 thumbs down into the third tier, 2 thumbs up, 1 thumbs down, and this happened, would be put into the second tier, and 2 thumbs down, 1 thumb up would be put into a sort of a purgatory tier, and then we would argue about those last 2 categories until we either until we got them definitively settled.
Right.
And a couple of beers were consumed, and there we are. And this is how we decided which holes to prioritize.
So this is tier 1 targets.
Right, that's right. So tier 1 targets then ended up being Promontorio, Nueva Europa, Europa-Guadalupe. And then we had Minas Nuevas and San Jose. All right, so what we have actually drilled in 2020 in phase 2 so far was Promontorio, Nueva Europa, Europa-Guadalupe, and San Jose, which is the fourth one, is number 4 out here to the west. So we have not yet drilled in the Cotera area, Minas Nuevas, or Alessandra. That's pending for 2021, as well as follow-up drilling in all of these areas. Okay, so at Europa-Guadalupe, we reported the results of 4 holes 41, 42, 45, and 47. These were the first vertical and lateral offsets of hole 7, close in. Remember, hole 7 was 8.25 meters of 1.7 kilos. In hole 42, we had a 3.5 meter intercept of 400 grams of silver. And it included a 1 meter or 1.15 meter zone of almost a kilo, 999 grams per ton of silver. I would like to have been able to add another gram, but I couldn't squeeze it out of the lab. So that's what we got there. Notice also the significant base metals on that intercept. Now, hole 42 was drilled approximately 100 meters up dip from hole 7. Hole 47 was drilled approximately 100 meters to the south at about the same elevation as hole 7. That gave us 6 meters of 356 grams of silver. And notice that it includes a 70 centimeter interval of 2 kilos with significant base metals. So what we're noticing here is that there is a downward increase in grade on this section and the adjacent section to the south from holes 41 and 42 to hole 7. We can speculate that we're in the uppermost portions of the silver chute. All right, so Europa-Guadalupe plan view and long section. So on the left side here, you've got your plan view on topography of the drill holes. The intersections, mineralized intersections, are shown in red, these red bars on the side. Notice that we have hole 51 and hole 49 and 50 are also plotted on here, and they're shown as assays pending. We will be releasing those results in the coming weeks. Hole 41 had 1.7 meters of 34 grams, so it's pretty weakly mineralized. However, the mineralization is about where we expected it to be, and that is in the immediate hanging wall, the fault contact of andesites on granodiorite. Hole 42, down the dip. Remember, this is a vein that is dipping to the east at about minus 55 degrees from horizontal. It's at hole 42, as I said before, 3.5 meters of 400 grams of silver. And then further down the dip, we had hole 7, which you've already described. Hole 47 is about 100 meters to the south, as you can see in plan view, 6 meters of 356 grams of silver. All right, now on the right side of the slide, notice that we're looking at a long section, and I've put colored dots in here to show the locations of these mineralized intersections. Remember again that the vein is dipping towards the viewer at minus 55 degrees. So you're looking at dots on an inclined plane in that diagram there. Hole 7 again, you can see the relationship. Hole 7 is 8 meters of 1.7 kilos. Hole 47 to the south, hole 42 above it. It's suggestive that we could have a south plunging chute on this section. Hole 50, there was a 55 centimeter vein intersection, and that assays are pending for that. And hole 45 had no significant values, but we need to talk about hole 45, where we expected to see the vein. We did see the fault contact of the granodiorite. In the immediate hanging wall of that fault contact is a faulted body of a felsite intrusion. We believe that these felsite intrusions are pre-mineral. Why that, and that it isn't, and we know that it's in fault contact from our drilling. So what we don't know is how widespread that body is. It may turn out that just a short distance to the north or down dip, that we might find that that intrusion is not there and the mineralization is. So we just haven't determined that yet. All right, hole 42. This is what it looks like in core. This core is sawed. When it comes out of the hole, of course, it looks a little bit more competent. This is what it looks like after we've sawed it. Notice that there's this crumbly rubble material from faulting. The highest grade intersection was from about this point here, if you can see my cursor, to approximately here. All right. And this ran, as I said, almost a kilo of silver with significant base metals. Had 84 parts per billion of gold. Then the next slide, we'll look more closely at some of these pieces from this area here. Notice this dark gray metallic material in a quartz matrix. In fact, there's more of this dark gray than there is of the quartz matrix in this particular shot. Most of this dark gray material is sulfide. In fact, almost all of it is. And much of it is a silver copper sulfide called stromayerite, although there is probably some contribution of McKinstryite, which is also a copper silver sulfide. There's also galena and sphalerite in this, probably a little bit of chalcocite. And you'll notice that right here, there's a little bit of veinlet of this yellow sulfide, yellowish sulfide, which is chalcopyrite, copper iron sulfide.
So do we see that across a lot of the results so far from phase 1 and a little bit of from what we have public in phase 2? Yeah, it's that silver pairing with the copper and some base metals. It seems like there's always a high silver. You see the high base
silver to copper is a pretty consistent, at least in the Promontorio, Quintera, San Jose area. That's a fairly consistent relationship. And at Quintera, I think I said at Quintera. At Minas Nuevas, it's a little different. You don't have the copper base metal association there. It's it appears to be a little bit different. Yeah, so there are zonations that occur, and even within the southern area that I was mentioning, Promontorio, Quintera, Europa, San Jose, there are distinct things. I'm kind of almost to the point now where I can look at an assay at random and tell you, well, this is from that area or that area, because it's because of these relationships, right?
Right. Phase 2 is answering a lot of these questions, right? So
yeah, that's correct. That's correct. And there's some other things about the alteration that that we've come to. It's not so obvious on that particular slide, but let me go to when I go to hole 47, it's somewhat more obvious. So hole 47. Now I've got these are photographs of the core just after it's come out of the hole and been cleaned off, and then we spray water on it to make it all nice and shiny. You notice here, and it reads from like a book, from left to right, top to bottom. Okay, mm-hmm. So each slide. So notice here that we are in this reddish andesite, and it gives way to this green alteration. Here it comes back to a little bit purple red, and then back to green, and purple red again, and then back to green. Here you've gone across the contact into the granodiorite, which is what you're looking at here. It's this green chlorite quartz alteration assemblage that appears to be associated with the sulfide mineralization in the Europa-Guadalupe zone. And this hole is a very good illustration of that. And we'll look a little bit more closely at this. I can zoom in a little bit here.
That same mineral that you mentioned earlier, stromayerite, same?
Yeah, that's right. And this is only about 100 meters to the south of hole 7. So it's basically the same. It's the same system. Yeah. But it has these different characteristics. And if you notice, I guess this is about as close as I can get with the zooming here. But you notice how the quartz veining is stronger in this area where you have chlorite alteration as well. The chlorite is a mineral that is an alteration product of various minerals, various original minerals, but it imparts this green color to the rock.
Right.
Okay. Some geologists are tempted to call it propylitic alteration. To me, classical propylitic alteration is chlorite, epidote, carbonate, and pyrite. Here we do have carbonate, we have very little pyrite, and we have lesser degrees of epidote. So I'm trying to be more careful to just say that this is chlorite, quartz, some carbonate alteration, and not talk about propylitic alteration in this case. Okay. Okay, here's some close-ups of core from hole 47, and I've shown the depths of each one of these pieces and the grades of the sample and the length of the sample that correspond to the particular piece. So on the left, this was part of a 70 centimeter interval that ran 2 kilos. Notice again this relationship of quartz and sulfides. In there, the dark gray material is mainly silver copper sulfide. There is some galena, there is some salarite in there as well. There's probably some acanthite and probably some chalcocite as well. But the dominant silver species, as far as we can tell, is stromayerite. So I can.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, so, and you can see some of this chloride alteration here on the side of this. In the next, photograph to the right of this, again, it was a 70 centimeter sample. This one only ran 265 grams per ton, but you see this dark gray material in here. This is the sulfide material that's hosting it. Notice we do see a little bit of amethystine quartz. Amethystine quartz, district-wide, I would say that amethystine quartz is typically much younger in post-mineral, or at least post-sulfide mineral. But there are some places where we see sulfide mineralization in that cuts amethystine quartz. So it's not completely later than the mineralizing episode. So again, but this is to give you an idea of the kind of variety of textures we're seeing here.
Multiple stages of mineralization.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we do not have that story all worked out. That's part of investigation. What we do know is that there are multiple phases and
Right,
multiple
multiple phases. Yeah.
differentiation, new pulses of quartz veining, carbonate veining, fluidized breccias. There's lots of stuff going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then here we have a lower grade interval, but notice again the quartz carbonate alteration, the brecciation of pre-existing quartz veins. We see some manganese oxide in here, this dark matte black material there, and this was from a sample that ran 144 grams per ton of silver. This is still, I suppose, potentially economic, but it's obviously lower grade than what we were looking at before. And you see, in fact, see fewer sulfides in this sample. But this is all from this interval.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Promontorio. So that was Europa-Guadalupe. And as I said, we'll have some more results to announce over the probably later this month. Mm-hmm. Promontorio. The first holes by Minaurum were drilled below the old workings, and below the old workings, and in the vicinity of and below the historical drill holes. Remember, I said that back during the 1960s there was an underground drilling program at Promontorio. Well, we wanted to try to confirm the results that they mentioned. There are mention of grades exceeding a kilo of silver in that. We wanted to know if there was, if we could confirm that and show that there was more of this below the deepest workings. So, and this is what we got here. We got 5 meters of 769 grams of silver in hole 46. We got nearly 3 meters of 600 grams in hole 44, and 1.7 meters of 144 in grams per ton of silver with significant base metals.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that.
Yeah, and you know, we can't, remember I was saying that I can start to distinguish these just on the basis of the assay. Right. You don't see these sort of base metals at the other producers.
Right.
It's only at Promontorio, so far anyway, that we've seen this. Something else to bear in mind here is that in that hole 46 interval, and I kind of blithely skipped over it, but there's 3.1 meters there that ran 1.2 kilos of silver with a percent of copper, but did not have the base metal values. So we already knew from historical reports, though, we knew that it had been there were descriptions of lead veins cutting the silver veins, and that those lead veins, they're massive galena, and they probably have quite a lot of zinc in them as well. Those lead veins would run hundreds of grams of silver or even a kilo, but because they were smelting all of their ore back in the old days, this wasn't convenient for them. So they ignored those lead veins. But, and I was told anecdotally, when I first came on the project, there was an old miner, it was a guy who was in his 90s, God rest, may he rest in peace, he passed away about 2 years ago, who had worked as an underground driller during the 1960s. And he told me about those veins. And he said, yeah. And so I heard this from two different sources, one a written report from the 1950s, and one from a guy who had actually lived it during the 1960s. So there you are. So there appear to be two different phases of mineralization at Promontorio that can be distinguished by their base metal to silver content.
Right.
As well. So let's take a look at where these holes were drilled in plan view and in cross section. So this is a modification of a map that was put up at Roundup and at PDAC last year. Many of the viewers, I'm sure, will remember this. Here on the left side shows the Minaurum drilling to date, or as of the press release in October.
Right.
Notice that we have holes 4 and 5 that were drilled back in 2017. They had interesting results. Hole 4, 20 meters of 150 grams per ton of silver, and hole 5, in which we got 3.15 meters of 300 grams of silver, a little more than that. We wanted to come back. Oh, and just thought I'd show down here in the southern part, hole 25 had 3.8 meters of 400 grams per ton of silver, and hole 34 had a meter or so of 729 grams. So we know that there's mineralization down in here. One of the things to remember at Promontorio is that there were 2 main areas of historical production. The first one was the Balvanera Dios Padre area up here in the north, and then the Las Guijas area down here in the south. Okay. So these are 2 separate areas. Apparently, the English miners abandoned this area when the discovery was made in Las Guijas, mined here for about a year, and then closed things down when the price of silver collapsed in 1895 or 1896. So we came in and drilled holes right here in the Balvanera Dios Padre area. In this area, the 1961 and 1966 underground drilling program intersected in the margins of the workings and slightly below, intersected mineralization of several hundred grams to over a kilo of silver, and some interesting gold values as well. So we wanted to take a look at that area, and that's what we reported in the press release in October, were the results of holes 43, 44, 46, and 48. So when you look in long section, now this is a section looking west, and here the vein zone is dipping away from the viewer approximately 75 degrees from the horizontal. All right, so this shaft here is the same as the shaft right there, and the Dios Padre shaft is this shaft up in here. So you're looking from here, that in that direction. All right, from old descriptions, we know that the stoped area is approximately like this in that long section. Hole 43, right at the bottom of the stoped area, hit 1.7 meters of 144 grams. And then hole 44, about 100 meters below it, drilled 7.6 meters of 260 grams per ton of silver. So we know that the mineralization extends below the workings. Yeah. Hole 46 had was right on the edge of workings, and it drilled 3 meters of 1.2 kilos of silver. So we like that. And hole 48, the grade dropped to we have a 2 meter interval of 83 grams of silver. So maybe we got a shoot going this way to this would be
right. Yeah, seems like it.
Possibly. It's something to be followed up on. We have further results from Promontorio. We'll be announcing them here over the next few weeks.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so let's look at some of these holes. Promontorio is pretty different from Europa, even though it's not very far away. It's the host rocks at Promontorio are andesites as they are at Europa, plus altered limestone. When I say altered limestone, it goes everywhere from at least recrystallized to hornfels and garnet skarn. So we see and biotite hornfels as well. We see these different alteration products. I lump them together for the sake of a presentation. I lump them together as limestone because that's the protolith. But that is not to say that that these differences in alteration may have some importance in terms of mineralization controls. There's also a great deal of granodiorite that intrudes the lower Cretaceous limestone. The granodiorite, we've recently dated it. It's laramide. It's about 75 million years. That granodiorite is also intruded by other quartz porphyries and granites that have a notable graphic texture in places, and all those rocks are brecciated. So there's a lot going on there. We believe that, or I believe anyway, that the andesites are all, the andesitic pyroclastic rocks are all younger than all of those intrusive rocks I just mentioned. There are, however, later andesite dikes that cut the Cretaceous intrusive rocks, they cut the limestone, they cut the andesite, and those andesite dikes are cut by mineralization. We do not have a date on the andesite dikes, nor do we have a date on the andesitic pyroclastic rocks.
Okay.
So anyway, the geologic situation there is a little bit different, mainly because of the presence of limestone and all of the intrusive rocks. So what does this look like in detail? Here in hole 43, remember we had this 1.75 meters of 144 grams per ton from about 165.50, it's about right here, to about right here. And so that's where we have this nice intersection. Actually, I'd take it back. It was it was to here. Right in here, we hit workings. We got through workings with the drilling and actually drilled on the other side of it there. It was about 1.5 meters across, something like that. So we knew we were right on the edge of workings. I'm guessing that this was a stope, and that's where the really high grade stuff was in that hole. Okay, so we showed that there is at least noteworthy mineralization on the immediate flank of old workings with this hole.
Right.
All right, hole 44 was drilled about 100 meters down dip. Remember the long section, and in this we had 2.9 meters of 600 grams.
Again, the base metals kicking up again.
The base metals kicking up again. Yes, that's exactly right. Notice here the epidote, this sort of pistachio green alteration. This is much more characteristic in the area of Promontorio, is epidote alteration. We do see chloride alteration. We see quartz alteration. We also see alteration related to the prograde skarn, the diopside garnet skarn mineral alteration. But here the main story is, of course, it's the sulfide mineralization. So let's take a closer look here at what we can see. Let's see if I can. Anyway, this dark gray material here, these are sulfides. Now, in this case, there's a fair amount of galena and sphalerite involved. But we also see, also have the presence of silver copper, that association again.
Right.
That is mostly stromayerite, and I guess there's probably some McKinstryite in there as well. But there's apt to be some acanthite, silver sulfide, as well as probably some chalcocite in there as well. So that's what that is, and we'll take a little closer look here. I'm going to zoom out. There we are. Okay, so looking here, this particular sample was almost a meter, 90 centimeters of 1.6 kilos. All right. This dark gray, this dark, almost black material, this is where the sulfide is.
Yeah, and again, 4% copper, high zinc values.
Right, and notice there's 1.4 grams of gold in this.
Yeah. Yeah,
there's a gold credit, and that is one thing that is distinctive about Promontorio. We have seen anomalous gold at Alessandra. We had one surface sample there that ran 3 ounces per ton. That was kind of by itself, and we have seen sporadic anomalous gold at San Jose, but Promontorio, at least so far, is more consistent with the 0.5 gram to 1 gram to up 2 or 3 grams, maybe in a couple of cases of gold. So we get a little bit of a bump from that as well in the Promontorio.
And what are some of the minerals in here then, in the core here?
Yeah, well, a lot of this dark material is marmotite, which is a iron-rich form of sphalerite.
Oh, okay.
Blackjack. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's what a lot of that material is. There's been a number of cases where we've looked at this at first glance at rock hand specimens and core. You see this black material and we think it's manganese oxide, and a lot of it is. But it's always worth taking a closer look, because sometimes it turns out that you're looking at that there's a contribution of iron-rich salarite as well, and that's what's getting you the bumps in zinc.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so hole 46. Okay, this hole was, at first glance, we noticed that this gaudy chrysocolla here, this blue-green mineral. Chrysocolla, of course, is a hydrous copper silicate. It's a secondary product of weathering or oxidation of copper sulfides. When we see chrysocolla, we suspect that we're going to have good silver grades as well. That's is a good rule of thumb at the Alamos project, and this case is no exception. Notice that we have a 5 meter interval of 769 grams of silver with 0.76% copper, within which is 3.1 meters of nearly 1.2 kilos. Anomalous gold, 1% copper. Notice though that the lead and zinc grades are weak. And so this is that earlier phase of mineralization. That's copper silver.
Right.
Whereas in hole 44 that I just showed you, we were looking at that later phase. Right?
Yeah.
So, it's something to bear in mind here. Again, to reinforce the point, we have multiple phases of mineralization. Let me just zoom in. All right. I think at this magnification, you can appreciate the banded nature of the veining. You see the amethystine quartz in here. That is later. It seems to be on the edges of this amethystine quartz vein where you had these grades. So again, multiple phases of brecciation, of veining. Some of them appear to be sterile or weak mineralizers at best. Others are better. So let's look a little bit more closely at a couple of close-ups here of this material. All right. So this is, again, these are close-ups of the sawed material from a 1.2 kilo interval. And again, the chrysocolla does, it's so easy to see, it really draws your eye. And when I see that, as I say, when I see something like this, I say, oh, that's going to be at least half a kilo, if not a kilo and a half, right?
Yeah.
Like that. So this is the kind of textures we see here. Notice you have multiple phases. You got a chunk of something that was broken off and then enveloped within the mineralizing fluids. Yeah. Various other breccia pieces here. Some of these breccia pieces are quite rounded. All the sharp edges are worn off, so that suggests it's reworked. The others are somewhat more angular. So it's a complex history, and we just started to sort this out in our heads. But this is the kind of material that you can see.
Interesting. That would have a kilo of silver in there.
Yeah, no, that's right. And again, remember that this is from apparently from that earlier phase of mineralization. This is, and then of course it's oxidized somehow. We're close enough to the surface here that I can believe that this is supergene oxidation. But as a kind of a related note, district-wide, we have been suspecting that there is hypogene oxidation, that is oxidation produced by magmatic fluids as opposed to surface meteoric fluids that have caused oxidation. This seems to be a characteristic of the region. We've seen this in a few other projects in southern Sonora. So it's
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, there's this interesting regional geochemical story as well. The next steps at Alamos. It's originally we intended to drill 20,000 meters or so as a kind of a round number in our phase of drilling. We've drilled 14,000 meters so far. We absorbed the information that we generated in 2020. We need to synthesize that, compile it, and then refine our targeting concepts for the coming year. So we will continue drilling on this. We're going to follow up some at Europa. At Europa there was some infill. Not so much infill drilling but there was some shallow target drilling that we didn't get to during 2020. We want to come back and do that, as well as deeper and along strike. At Promontorio, we need to take a very hard look at what we drilled there, and we're planning to get underground in the old Promontorio workings in the first half of 2020. And do a thorough mapping job in those old workings. That will shed considerable light on that prospect as well. We want to do some other underground mapping and sampling at La Quintera. We've also started rehabbing some of the entrances at the old La Quintera mine. So far, it's limited what we can see, but it's still valuable information. And we want to continue with that. Other ongoing surface generative work, yes, we will be doing some of that. It's going to be more focused, detailed work in the case of a few things at Europa, a few things at Promontorio, as well as over at San Jose and La Quintera. But the fact of the matter is when you drill more, you learn more, and you see things on the surface in a different light.
Yeah, of course.
So we will be following up on that to help to refine and more tightly focus our drilling in the future.
Well, that's the relationship that I mentioned when we began the presentation, was that unique marriage between the history of the project and our current drilling. I mean, we've come across a lot of things in the last few years, especially those historical records that we came across, and that has kind of changed the scope of our exploration to the positive, right? So I mean, in addition to all the holes that we have at the roundup 42 to 47, I mean, at the time of recording for this presentation, we hope to have more results out around the time of the of roundup, and any of you can see that at our virtual booth. We have tabs for drill core gallery, our drill core videos and photos. Our presentation, a copy of this presentation as well. So please feel free to, ask us any questions, and you can see some information there. Here's Steve's contact information. You can contact him by email if you have any questions on the program and what we're doing down at Alamos and our other projects. Here's my contact information. You can also follow us on Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and you can email us directly. But if you have, we're more than happy to answer any of your questions. So please visit our virtual booth. And thanks, Steve, for joining me. That was a pretty in-depth presentation. And
thanks, Tony, for the opportunity. I'm glad. Thank you for setting this up.
I guess thank you so much, everybody, and we'll see you at the virtual roundup. Thank you.
See you at roundup.